All right, so I want to quickly talk about deselection because this is something that has been discussed. There's been voices. Is there going to be a deselection of MPs and Labour MPs, assuming that Corbyn wins, for example, or even assuming that Smith wins? It could happen either way. So I think it's worth clarifying a few points. Interesting thing, it was actually Tony Benn who introduced mandatory reselection during another Labour split, one of many, well, that did lead to a split ultimately. So this was in '79, after James Callaghan's defeat to Thatcher, in an attempt to kind of split the party, in an attempt to re-identify an ideology, change the ideology of the Labour Party. And then it was actually abolished by Kinnock in 1990. And there's an interesting little exchange you can hear between Tony Benn and a few about this deselection that happened in the 1990s. Let's have a quick look at that.
Marx for the first time when he was in his 50s and thought he was absolutely marvellous and told us so. But of course he was exactly the sort of feudal socialist, the upper-class socialist, who was satirised by Karl Marx himself in the Communist Manifesto as a man who could make the bourgeoisie cringe with the wit of his satire, but basically totally ineffective in politics because of a total failure to understand the way in which the world was changing. And that was enormously true of Tony. I mean, if Tony had been right, Thatcher would never have been elected.
Because I felt really that what was needed was some way of tackling this problem of a totally independent parliamentary leadership that got into power on the basis of the movement and then kicked away the ladder.
His colleague, Michael Foot, told him, "You're nuts." But away from Westminster, Benn inspired Labour activists and young socialists.
So yeah, that was the two talking about it. It's interesting to hear how Tony Benn, defending his right, but it was seen as mutiny at the time, and it could arguably be seen as mutiny. It could be seen as undemocratic. At the moment, so it's been abolished, and it was replaced with something called a trigger election.
Trigger ballot.
A trigger ballot, yeah, that's right, yeah. So a trigger ballot, which essentially is a kind of an extra layer to the mandatory reselection. And it's, if an MP wants to restand in a constituency, there'll be a trigger ballot. And it'll be a simple yes-no vote among constituents and anyone who's registered to vote in the Labour Party, including unions. It'll be a simple yes-no, and it was 2/3 originally when it was introduced by Kinnock, and then Tony Blair reduced it to 50%. So only 50% of those constituents, those voters, would have to vote yes.
So Labour membership, constituents and affiliates in that constituency decide whether they want that person based on the last term, whether they want that MP to represent them.
Yeah, and if it's a no vote, then they go up for reselection, and there's another campaign within that constituency. So that's the situation at the moment. So that could happen. It would be a lengthy process, and there's also doubt as to how much say people would have. So the ordinary members, it's not weighted very well because the unions represent a vast majority of power within the trigger ballot. Whereas if there was mandatory reselection reintroduced, then it would be a one person, one vote, one member, one vote scenario. So everyone would get a say, and it would be basically up to the people to do that.
So the more power for the membership, less for groups.
Yeah, exactly right.
So each individual would have their own vote, independent of anybody else.
Yeah, if you're a member of the Labour Party.
Yeah,
basically.
So we're wondering whether Corbyn is going to reintroduce something like this.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, it's certainly worth talking about whether that could be something. I mean, there's a debate going on. Like Paul Mason, for example, talks about how if Corbyn gets back in, how should he proceed with, and he sets out a plan for the future, a policy-based direction, and he believes that it can be done within the party itself. Like there doesn't need to be a split, there doesn't need to be mandatory reselection or a purging of any kind. He believes, and he's got years of experience in that, but it's also disputed, this idea. But he believes that it can be done within the party. The right side, if you want to say, or the more centrist MPs, Labour MPs, could be brought into this plan, this Corbynista kind of plan. But maybe a split's better. Maybe it would be better to have a split, to send some people off in the wrong direction. Have the Corbyn far left, let's say, at the moment they're far left. Maybe form a coalition with other Liberal parties, the Green Party, SNP would be a wonderful addition. Get the whole of Scotland. I don't know if that would be possible. I don't know how. I know the Plaid Cymru have said that they'd be up for that. They'd be up for a cheeky little coalition.
Another party.
Yeah, a coalition. Whether that would be one unified party or it would be a coalition of, but that in the first past the post wouldn't.
One thing
cut
for
it.
sure. I mean, deselection in the way that you talk, one member, one vote would be of massive benefit to Corbyn.
Yeah, they would. Yeah.
It's like it's like it would be the greatest tool to be able to, but to get most of the party supporters are on his side, is the way it looks at the moment. But at the same time, I mean, isn't that removing Corbyn, whether it's beneficial for him or not? Don't we want to see a more democratic political party?
I think what we're seeing and what we saw from, we're going to talk about this later, we're going to touch on it, the referendum. We're not going to go into too much detail because it's been played out consistently for the last month or so. But I think that kind of highlighted or it brought to bear the cracks that democracy kind of has. Like, maybe not. Maybe there's not room within one party for such a wide spectrum, and there is quite a big spectrum in the Labour Party. And the other interesting thing is that maybe it's because of the spectrum, or maybe it's because of the tendency of the left to just argue constantly and to not be able to decide to break off into quite specific ideologies. Whereas the right, you look at the...
FYI, there are, I believe, 2 different socialist parties in the UK.
Oh, really?
Come on, guys, the revolution, if it's ever going to come, I think you should probably try and work together, and a communist one.
Yeah, whack the communists in as well.
So they could probably...
my opinion on the matter, my opinion on the matter is that I think a split has to happen. I know it's probably quite a controversial opinion. It's definitely a controversial opinion. A lot of people, and actually the rhetoric of the two, of Owen Smith and Jeremy Corbyn is, let's avoid a split at all costs. But I can't see, 9 months down the line, is this going to happen again? An opposition, there needs to be a strong opposition. Whether you believe Corbyn can do that, whether you believe Smith can do that, there needs to be an opposition who are not going to fight each other constantly and not going to try and undermine each other constantly. That is not going to be an effective opposition. I think that, for me, that's the bottom line.
How much support has Smith got?
His family. And
loving wife.
And none of Wales, it seems. No one likes him.
172 people at...
160 MPs, vote no confidence.
Right, so,
he was
how many of them have moved towards... is Smith the representative of these 172? Is he representative of the proportion?
I think that's a very, very good point. How many people actually now are they talking within the Parliamentary Labour Party about, how much support does he actually have within the PLP, or is it they haven't managed to field another candidate?
That's it. I think that's it.
Well,
they're just like,
there for the sake of
Smith.
He's sitting there thinking, I don't want Corbyn in charge, and everyone else is stepping forward. I'll put myself forward. He could have some.
Same with Eagle. Angela Eagle was seen. She had one good innings in the Commons. I remember when she stood in for. Was it Corbyn? She stood in for someone. She was delivering Prime Minister questions, and she was good. But she's absolutely useless.
It's very hard to say, isn't it, how much support he actually has within there. But you talk about a split, right? And also that we need an effective opposition. But if we see a split which may give 2 people parties they can more identify with, great. I think that would make a lot of people more happy. But then you've just got all these diverse parties having to still come together to agree to form some kind of opposition, and if anything, that seems more
implausible.
Yeah, more implausible.
But
maybe.
Look, traditionally, if you just look at traditional general elections, you've got it's there, isn't it? It's Labour or Conservative. They are your 2 parties. It's red or blue.
And the Liberal
Democratic Liberals.
That's the one.
Who obviously are ex-Labour.
But the Liberal Democrats historically had a far smaller minority than they did almost just which was the election where they ended up in the coalition?
2011? I think so. 2010, 2011.
They had a spurt of growth under Clegg, and now they've diminished again.
Sunk into oblivion.
Well, yeah. So if you were to split the Labour Party into two, you're dividing. You need that half just to be able. I mean, the Conservatives do not look like they're going to split it anytime soon. The Conservatives are not a divided party.
They're evil geniuses.
Say it from what you
Trust the right to rally behind each other.
If you split the Labour Party, which one of those is going to gain enough movement to battle this sort of 35 to 40%?
Well, to answer your question, Liberal Democrats, I mean, they were born of a split in Labour. I mean, the Bennite split that happened in the 90s, that's how the Liberal Democrats were formed. So there's hope. I think
they had to form a coalition with the Conservatives in order to almost to get into government or to run government.
I thought the Liberal Democrats were the Whigs of the 19th century. They just slowly.
No, I think that
supports.
the Whigs.
Stuff out before, but I thought that.
The Whigs and the Tories.
That they're the old Whigs and that Labour just outgrew them and essentially became a bigger movement.
I think they're an extension of the Whigs, but as far as I know, anyway, the split happened in the 90s, and there were the Social Democrats, and then the Social Democrats formed a coalition and created the Liberal Democrats.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, how does a split benefit Labour in any way, shape or form? I mean, you've both said that Corbyn and Smith don't want it. Because all you're doing is giving the Conservatives
well,
a higher
I think the idea is, it's really frustrating for a bunch of people who have a clear idea of what they want, having to not be able to actually pursue that, and instead have to convince a bunch of other people who seem diametrically opposed to them, even though they're not, and can't act. They're kind of paralysed. So maybe there could be more dynamism within a more narrow political unit. But again, that relies massively on being able to cooperate, which is the same kind of issue within one pie as it would be in two.
Yeah.
So
Corbyn wouldn't resign, even after 172 votes.
As long as he's got the support.
And I agree. Yeah. Is there any scope? I mean, does Corbyn want to be a Prime Minister? Does Corbyn want to be the leader? Is that what it's all about for him, being the leader of the Labour Party?
It's the long game, I would say.
Is his game about making change, making difference? I mean, if someone else, a promising leader, because presumably that's what Corbyn doesn't appear to be to a lot of people, if a promising leader was to come through, would Corbyn throw his weight and support behind that?
I think we have the answer. No. I mean, although I think if Owen Smith is to win the leadership election, then I mean, all Corbyn's stance has been, I'm here because people voted for me and I would be letting them down if I didn't continue as leader. And I think I believe him, given how much he's attempted to democratise the party, the PMQs being questions from the populace, for example. So I believe that he would. If Owen Smith were to win, I fully believe that Corbyn would throw his support.
So that could actually.
It could be the answer to the words.
I'm not saying it's the answer, but I'm saying that one like that, if he didn't feel strongly opposed to Smith as an individual, as a person, if Smith was to win and Corbyn was to go, okay, democracy has proceeded here. Smith is the leader. I'll now support Smith, and that would hopefully bring those who support Corbyn.
You're right.
You wouldn't have a divided party.
There's two outcomes. If Smith wins, nothing will change. I think that's we can agree that that's going to be the case. Corbyn's not going to try and rip away the left part of Labour. I don't think there's anything to gain. If the people speak and they say we want Smith, he'd stand back and say okay, fine. But the only way a split would happen is if Corbyn won, and the 172 MPs and that big proportion of Labour, if they didn't get behind him, if there wasn't a sign that there was going to be any stability, from now until the 2020 election, a split would have to be considered, I think.
I think we can probably leave that
there.
one there.